Now that we're all set up with Parse Server on AWS, we're going to spend a couple of videos seeing how we can work with Parse objects to save, restore, and search objects on our Parse server. So I'm going to start by just deleting this code, which is really only there to make sure your Parse installation is working correctly. And we're going to be writing our code over in main activity. So let's say we're making a game and we want to save the user's score on Parse to share it between devices or to display it on some kind of leaderboard. Well, what we do is we create a Parse object. This time we might call it score. And this is going to be a new Parse object. And then we give it a class name. And because this is a class name, it starts with a capital letter. And we can, of course, call it whatever we like, but something like score would make sense. So just jumping back over to our data browser, at the moment, our class that we've created is called example object. And we've also got user and session as classes as well. So we don't need to define the score on Parse in any way. If it's not already there, then Parse will set it up for us. So then we might want a couple of bits of data in this score object. So we use score.put to do that. And then you can see we've got string value and object value. So the string is the name of the variable that we want to save. So for example, we might want username. And then that username might be Rob. And that would then save a variable called username with a value of Rob as a new object within the score class. Similarly, we might want to put the score itself. So maybe I'm doing pretty well at this game and I've got a score of 86. And that will automatically create it as a certain type. So this will of course be a string and this will be an integer. And then we've got a number of ways of saving this object. If I start typing save, you can see we've got two main options there. We've got save in background, which is just the standard save. And then we've got save eventually, which works a little bit differently, and it will save when we have an opportunity to save. So maybe the user's offline. If that's the case, then save in background won't work, but save eventually will remember and then save as soon as is possible. Normally we're going to want save in background because we're going to want to save right there and then, but save eventually can be useful as well. And then notice we've also got callback options. So we can just use a standard save in background. And if we run that, that will attempt to save it, but it doesn't give us any idea as to whether that's been successful. So almost always, I think it's a good idea, unless you really don't care whether it's been successful or not, to use the callback option. And then to add a callback, we just create a new save callback. There we go. And that will give us a done method, which will be called when the save is done, either successfully or not. And then the easiest way to check if it's been successful is look for an error or an exception. And if there isn't one, i.e. if E is null, then we can log something like save in background as our tag and successful as our message. And of course, if that's not the case, then we can log save in background failed. And if we want to, we could add the error, for which we might use e.toString or something like that. So let's just quickly see that in action. Hopefully that's fairly clear. We're setting up a Parse object called score, which is of a class score. we're adding a username and a score to it, and then we're saving in the background with a callback to check if it's been successful or not. If it has, we'll log successful. If not, we'll log failed. Let's take a look. And there we go. Looks promising. So then we can always go over to our data browser and refresh. And we should see our new score class appearing there with our one object within it. And there it is. There's our score. Username Rob, score 86. Excellent. So now we know and understand, hopefully, how to save objects. How about restoring them? So if we want to get a value from Parse server. So let's see how to do that. I'll just start by commenting out the save code so that we don't end up saving that multiple times. And then to bring back data from our Parse server, we use a Parse query. And we're running a Parse query on a Parse object. We'll call the query query. And this is going to be a Parse query dot get query. And we're going to put in the class that we want to query, and that's score. And then we use query.get in background, and we'll use the callback version. And you can see we need to provide an object ID. Now the object ID can be found here. Every object on Parse is automatically given an object ID. So I'm just going to copy that. There's my object ID. And we'll need a get callback. And as usual, we'll do a quick check to see if E is null. Then we should be able to use our object here. We might even want to check for object not being null. Then we could log object value and then say I want to get the username. That's a string, so I'm going to use object.get string, and the string I want to get is username. So that's this variable here, which I know is a string. Similarly, if I want to get the score, I can do it in much the same way. Object.get and int. And the int that I want to get is a score. And we'll need to convert that to a string to log it. So int dot to string, like that. There we go. So that's how we get objects back from Parse. Let's just have a look and make sure that that gives us the values that we're expecting. So we should get a username of Rob and a score of 86. And there we go. There's our Rob, there's our 86. We can also update our values here. So if we want to update a value that exists already, so say I've had a nice long session on this game and I've gone from a score of 86 to a score of 140, then I just take my object and update the value. So I'm going to change score to 200. And then I can use object.save in background. And this time I won't have a callback because I don't really need to check. I'm pretty sure it's going to work, and I'll refresh the data browser when it's gone anyway. Notice that the object.getInt score will also be updated because we're updating the object locally i.e. on the device within our app, and then we're saving it on our server using the save in background command. So we don't need to get it again for it to be already updated in our app. One thing you might have noticed is we can't use the instant restart, unfortunately, because of the complexity of the app that we're working with now. Bit of a shame, but a small price to pay, I think, for all the convenience. So there we go. We've got a score of 200 here. If I go back over to our data browser and refresh, it should give me the new score of 200. Fabulous. All right, time for a quick challenge. I'm going to comment out all of this. And for this challenge, I want you to just practice what we've just learned by creating a tweet class containing a username and a tweet. And the username and the tweet can be whatever you like. Tweet can be just hey there or something simple like that. And then save that on Parse. And then query it and update the tweet content. So we're assuming that someone wants to edit the tweet that they've already saved, and then we're updating the tweet content to the new content, whatever you want that to be. So it's just an opportunity to practice what we've had. Try and do it without going back and looking over your earlier work if you can, but if you do need to go back for a hint, then that's fine. All right, best of luck. Go for it. All right, here we go then. So I'm going to create a Parse object, which I'll call tweet, which is going to be a new Parse object with a class name of tweet with a capital T. And then we're going to set up a username, which this time will be Tommy. And a tweet, which I'll just have as hey there. And then we'll use save in background with a new save callback and a quick check to see if there's no error. We'll log tweet successful. And if there is an error, we'll log tweet failed. All right, let's give it a go. One thing to note on the Parse dashboard is if you just use the refresh button here, that only refreshes the score class. And indeed, it only refreshes the values. So if you've added an extra column and you refresh, that won't be reflected. So if you want to look for a whole new class or for a whole new column within a class, then you'll need to refresh the whole page. But just before I do that, I'll have a look at the logs. And hopefully I should see tweet successful. And there it is. So all is looking promising. Let's jump back over and do a proper full page refresh. And now you can see my tweet class is there. Excellent, with the tweet and the username. And I'm going to copy the object ID. And now I'm going to write my code to bring that tweet back and update its value. So we'll create a parse query. And this is a parse query on a parse object. Again, I'll call it query. And this is going to be a parse query.get query on the tweet class. And then we use query.getInBackground, and then we'll paste in the object ID, and we'll have a new get callback. And in fact, I'll just copy and paste this time. So we'll do a double check for E is null and object is not null. And so if this is the case, not only do I want to log that it's successful, but I also want to update the content. So I use object.put, and then I want to update the tweet variable, this bit here, to bye. And then of course, save in background, and I'll leave out the callback this time. And let's check the logs. So tweet has been successful, we're looking good. Let's have a quick refresh here, and we should see now that the tweet has been updated to bye. Wonderful. So now hopefully you get the basic idea of saving and updating objects. One thing that you might be thinking is, how on earth would we know this ID of our average object? Well, the answer is most of the time we don't. So we need to know how to query objects, for example, to find all the tweets by a certain username. And that is what we'll see how to do in the next video.